Welcome to the Joanne Avison podcast. Today I'm going to answer a question that somebody sent in to me regarding where the law of three came from. And in part, its origins are back in the ancient wisdom of the Vedic sages, if not others, and the discovery of the symbol of zero as we know it today. And I wrote a chapter in my book, Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement, that wasn't really about yoga. It was much more about ancient wisdom and new knowledge and the new science of body architecture. But I used yoga as a theme, not so much to explore postures, but to go deeper on the wisdom behind our knowledge and understanding that we've kind of divorced. And I think it's essential as we learn to understand fascia as the fabric of our form and as the interface of our being in our bodies, and having much more depth and breadth and wisdom and consciousness than we necessarily give this exquisite tissue credit for. I've always come to it as part of our awareness. So for me, not only does consciousness reside in the tissue, but the tissue is an active lens through which consciousness animates. And whatever level of animation we're at, it's unique to each one of us. It's possible through our connections to honor and express our own consciousness and reflect others around us as the same kind of mutual, beneficial organization we are as one species and as one being of that species. Same but different, right? Anyway, in order to make some sense of this, what I thought I would do is read you the beginning of the chapter on it in my book, Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement. First of all, I'm going to distinguish an archetype, because an archetype also can be better understood if we bring in the law of three, which is the idea of stereotype, archetype, and prototype. I'll talk about this at more length in another podcast, but essentially a stereotype is a fixed type. And for example, our left brain hemisphere prefers a stereotype. It likes to understand things the way they are, with definitions and distinctions that give them a fixed iteration and make it very clear, so we know exactly what to do and what we're dealing with. The word stereotype comes from stereos, meaning fixed in Greek. Now, archetype is more something we'd find in the right hemisphere. That is the nuanced expression of an original type that is expressed in many ways. So archetypes in the human being, for example, are, according to Jungian, I want to say philosophy, but Jung believed that the collective consciousness is full of archetypes, and we can distinguish our own archetypal patterns. So, for example, I obviously have the archetype of the storyteller. It's so deep to my bones. I literally would die without it. My father was a storyteller. God bless him. The best I knew. And I have the privilege of working with and being friends with John Sharkey and Paul Thornley, two more storytellers. So when we all get going, oh my goodness, it can be so much fun. Storytellers tell stories, right? But they storify things. Now, so in the collective consciousness, we all have different archetypes. And I'm going to talk about this at length in another podcast. But there is a third, because the law of three, there's always a way of triangulating something that we want to understand. So the third thing is a prototype. And a prototype is a unique version of something. So I like to think of all of us as having our stereotypical states, our archetypical states, and then where they meet in the middle, and it's like a figure of eight, is our prototype, us. We're unique. So I go into this in great detail in my next book, and I talk about the archetypal patterns of motion. They are so useful, and I can't wait to share that with you. But for now, I'm going to talk about archetypal geometries. So what I'm referring to are archetypes, i.e. nuances of the original geometries. And this chapter is headed by a quotation from Michael S. Schneider, somebody who I consider to be very brilliant. And he wrote a book called A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, The Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art and Science. And it's HarperCollins, and it was published in New York in 1994. I think it's one of the best books ever written for people that are fascinated by geometry, by nature, and are willing to accept that we are nature's expression of geometry with a variety of frequencies available to us because we have language and because we have consciousness at another level. That's my personal opinion, but let me read you this. Unity always preserves the identity of all it encounters. We might say that one, in inverted commas, waits quietly within each form without stirring, motionless, never mingling, yet supporting all. The monad is the universe's common denominator. The ancient Gnostics called it the silence force. The universe was carved of this primeval silence. Everything strives, in one way or another, toward unity. Michael S. Schneider. I love that because I think we are unity, walking around with the possibility of unifying our species, our consciousness, our wisdom. And we've grown up, particularly in the last 2,000 years, in a world where our process is based on divide and conquer. And I invite us all to consider that even as embryos, we talk about cell division, and actually it's cell multiplication, and we shift our thinking from divide and conquer to multiply and unify, multiply and unite. I kind of think that's what we're here to do as a species, and the fascia allows us to recognize that we already are unified. And the more we honor how it grows in us and how we grow it, the more we respect its tensional structure, its pre-tensioned architecture that makes us an instrument, a very refined instrument, that gives us this sense of orchestration. And I think we underestimate our power of orchestration. And I think it's a huge possibility for us all to discover and explore. So I'm going to read you some of this chapter. Any number or fraction divided by or multiplied by 1 preserves its identity and wholeness. If we go back to considering ancient wisdom in the history of anatomy, we can view it in a slightly different light. When it comes to understanding yoga at a symbolic and archetypal level, beyond the postures and general practices, we can perhaps begin to see how yoga and fascia provide fascinating pathways towards the unity everything strives for. The common denominator of both is the geometry of form, as a result of force transmission. Together, these emergent properties co-create the patterns in the matter of living architectures. Geometry, lost in significance to some extent since the advent of calculus, has profound significance in the study of the fascial matrix. If we could consider geometry as a kind of structural code of nature, it suggests the formulae of forming that living tensegrity architecture is beginning to reveal and explain. As we explore, we discover that each number that we use from 0 to 9 has a symbolic role and an archetypal character as well as its mathematical meaning. It is possible that the ancients understood mysteries that the study of fascia is providing new access to. For long before yoga came to the West, the patterns used to symbolize the chakras, for example, were schematized in the architectural designs of sacred sites. While modern technology is supporting our efforts to see new things, it may simply be allowing us to explore new ways of seeing things already there, perhaps reuniting us with mysteries that our ancestors understood before the advent of technology. Indeed, they are at the source of the mathematical origins of that technology. And then I have an image of the Sanskrit numerals that have become 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Please note that's 10 symbols of the numbers that we use, which we refer to as numbers 1 to 9, and you'll recognise the significance of this later. Back to the Renaissance. Alongside the other discoveries made at the same time of the Renaissance in Europe, came the discovery for Europeans of civilizations to the east and west as Christopher Columbus set sail to India and discovered the Americas. The first European to reach the Indian subcontinent was Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese sailor whose journey prescribed the first trading lines, the earliest cultural connective tissue pathways between the East and West. Alongside the exotic spices and silks they found in the rich and colourful markets of India, da Gama and the early travellers to India brought back the concept of zero. For it was in these markets that the ancient sages had devised the numeric system of symbols that we use today. Zero, entering nothing. This concept provided numerical relationships in a way that had not been considered in the West. Zero, as a concept, gave rise to new possibilities of understanding. This is exactly where the state of neutral, referred to throughout this work, resides. The opposites or polarities can be united through zero, extending the opposite ends of the line to a triangulated area of a third state. Plus and minus live either side of zero. Together, all three permit paradox, but also unite to give each other their relative meaning. It is profoundly symbolic of how fascia unites muscle and bone as a simple example and allows them to function as such by providing an essential aspect of both, incorporating each in the overall equation of motion. Zero in Sanskrit, sanyam, sanyam, means empty place, desert, naught. And then, quoting Douglas Harper, but the next step, the true miracle moment, is to realize that that symbol for nothing that you're using is not just a placeholder, but an actual number. That empty and nothing are one. The null number is as real as 5 and 2002. That's when the door blows open and the light blazes forth and numbers come alive. Without that, there's no modern mathematics, no algebra, no modern science. And as far as we know, that has only happened once in human history, somewhere in India, in the intellectual flowering under the Gupta dynasty about the 6th century CE. There was no miracle moment, of course. It was a long, slow process. Negative and positive can only be known mathematically in the context of the existence of zero between them. So consider the -1, the 0, and the +1, -1 and +1 being either side of 0. The dot in the decimal system recapitulates the placement either side of 0, showing whether it is negative or a positive number, by showing if it is a so-called whole number or a fraction. It is a scalable whole system. +1 and -1 are so because they sit either side of this non-thing, neither one nor the other. We call it naught. It was considered to be naught. Yoga begins and ends with the circle, the symbol of 0, which at the same time represents oneness. It is in an aspect of every kind of practice. The symbol for 0 is a circle, also known as the monad. The symbol for 1 is the monad. It is a circle with a dot at the center. The wonderful saying so often heard in Asia, same but different, applies perfectly here. It is a conundrum that yoga embraces, the one and the all ultimately becoming the same. It symbolizes roundness, and from that moment on, we develop a new theme of how round things work in their universes on every scale. Every single circle everywhere abides by the same rules, ratios, and relationships with other circles. We just find it very much harder to see when we pop them icosahedrally into high-frequency spheres. We'll get to that later. It is harder to see through the spheres to work out how cells organize as a whole. However, it is time. The unifying principle of 0. During the Renaissance, these Indian symbols came to replace the Roman numerals that were in common usage at the time. The logic of the Roman system was not as elegant and scalable as the Vedic numerals. It did not include the symbol or the concept of 0. And this is a quote from Herbert Mieszkowski, Ways of Thought of Great Mathematicians, published by Holden Day in San Francisco in 1964. I also go on to talk from Howard Eves, An Introduction to the History of Mathematics, Reinhardt and Company, New York in 1953, and David Osborne, 1989, Mathematics and the Spiritual Dimension, The Clarion Call. And this article is now incorporated with illustrations in Narasingha Chaitanya Matha. And you can find all these references in my book in chapter 12. I just want to be clear who I'm quoting from. And I quote, "The Vedic mathematicians had developed the decimal system of tens, hundreds, and thousands, etc., where the remainder from one column of numbers is carried over to the next. It has been said that the introduction of 0, or sanya, as the Indians called it, in an operational sense, as a definite part of a number system, marks one of the most important developments in the entire history of mathematics. The earliest preserved examples of the number system, which is still in use today, are found on several stone columns erected in India by King Ashoka in about 250 BCE. Similar inscriptions are found in caves near Pune, 100 BCE, and Nasik, 200 BCE. These earliest Indian numerals appear in a script called Brahmi. And this is a little side teach that I put in the book. In the Roman system of numerals, the number and the number of digits have to be translated, added, and subtracted. Letters stand for numbers, and the placement of a letter or letters before or after another indicates whether it should be added or subtracted from the main number, which is a letter. I give several examples of this in the book, but basically one has to count in order to count. It is apparent from further studies by David Osborne, the writer of the article quoted from above, that the need for numeric reference, the use of algebra and so on, developed in India from the culture honouring its spirituality, rather than simply studying mathematical logic to quantify and measure. By following the phases of the moon, the number of days in cycles in nature, the sages could ensure appropriate timing of ritual and rite in the context of their spiritual culture. Numbers formed part of their devotional expression and poetry. They did not segregate that knowledge and apply one mathematics to the other things to measure, as if the practice of mathematics was separate from the context of nature and devotion to her forms. It was considered part of the means by which those forms express themselves, or we might say, by which nature expresses them. They used number reverently and symbolically to honour nature rather than reduce it. Body, mind, and spirit were not relegated to separate domains, nor were mathematics, physics, and biology separated. The vision remained whole, seeking explanations of differentiations in scale rather than between the components of parts. These ancient sages placed the boundaries in very different ways. They made a distinction between the reasoning mind, the functioning form, and the spiritual awareness that were not segregated as separate domains of abstraction. Rather, they were distinct, related aspects and stages in developmental awareness that engaged a student in a devoted, practical lifetime of understanding the ways of life, of nature, and of being. And I quote, "After 700 CE, another notation, called by the name Indian numerals, which is said to have evolved from these Brahmi numerals, assumed common usage, spreading to Arabia and from there around the world. When Arabic numerals, the name they had then become known by, came into common use throughout the Arabian Empire, which extended from India to Spain, Europeans called them Arabic notations because they received them from the Arabians. However, the Arabians themselves called them Indian figures, al-Arkan al-Hindu, and the mathematics itself was called the Indian art, Hindisat. Indian Sanskrit, like Greek and Hebrew and Arabic, is an alphanumeric language. In alphanumeric correspondences, a difference of 1 is allowed. That basically means that every letter in the alphabet has a numeric value. The Greek word monad adds up to 361, symbolizing the number of degrees in a circle. One particular Sanskrit verse has a numeric value of 0.3149293897932384626433833292. That is pi divided by 10 to 32 decimal places. It is unlikely to be pure coincidence that pi is the number derived from dividing the circumference of any circle by its diameter. It is an infinite number. The poem is a prayer to the infinite, eternal, divine. Wow. Just wow. In Indian numerals, only 10 figures were required in a pattern based on numeric archetypes that repeat themselves in a decimal logic. These archetypes incorporate the universal basis of nature's forms presented in all her geometric mystery. The different numeric values and geometries are found in flowers, plants, snowflakes, trees, growth patterns, features and faces of fish, animals, and humans. The patterns of leaves, insects, atoms, molecular arrangements, and planetary orbit patterns contain these archetypal designs. Spirals and chirals, forms of wood, flows of water, and the structure of crystals all present the variations on a theme represented by each of the different numbers. Everywhere, from the cosmos to the microcosmos and back again, including the macrocosmos, These shapes conform to the formulae found in symbolic mathematics. The archetypal 1 and 0 brought about what we call the decimal system and the binary system of computer coding that modern technology is founded upon. To ancient mathematical philosophers, the circle symbolized the number 1. And I quote Michael Schneider again. They knew it as the source of all subsequent shapes, the womb in which all geometric patterns develop. The Greek term for the principles represented by the circle was monad, from the root menin, to be stable, and monas, or oneness. They noted that unity exists in all things, yet remains inapparent. I just love that. So there you have the first part of chapter 12. I hope you enjoyed it. Even if it didn't all add up and make sense, or you have to listen to it again, you will no doubt be fascinated. I am, anyway, reassured that there was so much more to what we understand behind shapes and symbolic patterns that make sense of our human architecture. I'm going to link this to another podcast. I'm going to carry on with this chapter from Literal and Symbolic Beginnings and read it to you in bite-sized pieces. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to press the subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss the next piece as we continue with Literal and Symbolic Beginnings, because it's just delicious and it makes sense of so many questions we're all trying to answer. God bless you and enjoy being you. Take care.